Welcome, my name is Colleen Tauke and I'm the sewing specialist for Fons and Porter. In this video, I'm going to show you a technique for making the 3D bow tie, which is used in the quilt called Casual Friday. Now the quilt behind me is Casual Friday, wonderfully made with two colors of denim fabric, lightweight denim fabric, and all these wonderful flannels in different colors. And you'll notice that these are dimensional, what we would call the 3D bow tie. In the past, we've created blocks with just one bow tie covering the intersection, but in this quilt, we're going to cover all the intersections with these knots. But there's a way to get at it that takes a little bit of time and you can accomplish it. So let's get to work. What we're going to be doing is following the pattern for the number of dark navy, indigo, and light denim blocks that we need for the background. And you can see that they're in a checkerboard style. They alternate back and forth, across and down. And then we're going to be using 5-inch squares of some really wonderful flannels. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take some of those flannels, or all of the flannels, and we're going to take them to the ironing board and we're going to press them in half. You can see here this is the back side of the flannel. We're going to fold them wrong sides together. We're going to press here through all of the flannels required for this quilt. So you'll need to press those and have a stack of, now we're going to call those rectangles throughout the pattern. Okay? So here we go for laying this out. It seems a little bit confusing at first, so we've created the So Easy with great photographs and then this video to help walk you through it. What we're going to be doing is creating vertical rows down through the quilt. So we're going to start with row 1. What would we be doing and what would row 1 look like? So I'm going to lay these out. And you'll notice those rectangles now of flannel are popping up. Slide that up a little so we can see everything. One of your little friends might become these kind of sticky dots and a marker, so you can mark the top orientation of your block. Think like the way we read. Start at the left, at the top, and mark your block there so that it always stays in the very top. It'll help you stay oriented as you move from your design wall or your cutting surface to your sewing machine. It helped me figure this one out. Okay, so here we've got all these rectangles that are positioned on the alternating background denim fabrics. Now, we also are going to be aware the whole time that the fold of that, what used to be a square, now a rectangle, that fold is always oriented toward the center of the block. That's vital to creating those bow ties. So here's my inside folds here and then along this edge. Now at the very top, the first block, you're going to orient 3 of those rectangles on the first one, and you're going to go in and set your stitch length long because these are going to be basting stitches at first. Otherwise we would have to pin everything and probably get stabbed before we were done. So we're going to baste these along the seam line. The bottom of these 2 will be attached here. This is attached along the side, so keep this guy out of the way while you're stitching. You just want him basted there. Then block 2 gets 2 rectangles. We're going to baste along the bottom of that one. I've oriented this so it should look just like your So Easy. We've got the next block or any consecutive blocks between the top and the bottom will have 2 bars like this. Again, basted at the bottom. The very last block in the row gets 1 rectangle. It's oriented differently. It's laying on its side. The fold is here, and you're going to baste along the short side. Now, once you've gotten an entire row, I've shortened this up so they'll fit in the sewing surface. I've only got 4, but yours would have, I believe, 13 blocks oriented along here. A lot of repeating of this layout. You're going to join these into one row, and you'll see why we had you baste them, because you're going to lay 1 block on top of another, and you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam here. And that would help you keep everything in place as you take it to the sewing machine. And I'll sew 1 through. It's going to be going through thickness. The denim that we're using here is a shirt weight kind of denim so that it is easier to stitch through. You shouldn't need a heavier needle or anything at this point. You won't even need a walking foot. So you can just set your machine for its normal stitching. And then, see how when I'm opening that up, I'm looking for the dot at the top so that I know that's the top. That's why I said either a pin there or a sticker or something to tell you which is the top block so that you've got this oriented and there's your seam. Continue in that manner, down through the row, seaming here, opening out, again, seaming here, and across the last one. Now the denim is somewhat loose weave. You may want to use spray starch or sizing to help you kind of stabilize that. Handle it as gently as possible. You're going to create row 1, and I have row 1 here, all done. Very similar color arrangement. So we got row 1 all joined together. We've accomplished one thing. Now we need to come in and make row 2. What we wanted to, usually in our mind would want to do is go ahead and connect row 2 and then join it. But because we're going to make those knots at each of the intersections, we have to do it block by block. So I'm laying out blocks then for what row 2 needs to look like and how the rectangles need to be oriented. See, I've got a number 2 at the top here. These would be the top block, the center blocks, and then again the bottom block. And you can see that this one is now missing a bar. So it only has 2. They are basted along the short end here, here, remembering to orient the folds toward the inside of that block. 2, 3, and any consecutive blocks in that row only have 1 bar to the right of it, and those are basted in place. And you'll see that the bottom block looks a lot like the bottom block in row 1, which is correct. So you baste it here, again, fold is toward the center. Now I'm going to slide these down because we're going to add 1 block at a time. The fun part is that we're going to be needing to create a knot at this intersection. What we need to do is have this short seam, or short end of the rectangle, be oriented into here, which means that I need to orient it like this. And it seems kind of awkward, but that's okay. You're doing it right. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to put in a couple of pins. We're going to match raw edges here and along the corner so that it's placed properly. Now you see why we basted these other pieces in place. These are just temporary pinnings, okay? Next we're going to take the block that becomes right below it, and we're going to put it right sides together, like a sandwich. That rectangle then is caught like kind of like the peanut butter in the sandwich. It's under there. We're going to take the pins out, and I'm going to go down through all layers now. This, and then I'm going to put a pin just over here so things don't slide. That's where my basted rectangle is at. And I want to seam, 1/4 inch seam along here. Now that means I also have to take this with me to the sewing machine, so I'm going to just kind of fold it up gently. I'm going to slide this over. If you've got a place where you can use a flat surface to get everything ready and go right to the sewing machine, it's to your advantage. So 1/4 inch seam right along here, pulling our pins as we go. And you probably will fall in love with this quilt and say, oh, I just want to make it. Yes, it does take a little bit of patience. It takes a little bit of time, but great sweat equity in the end because you get a wonderfully comfortable quilt. Okay. And now this is what it's going to look like when we bring it out. I'm going to lay this back out so you can get yourself oriented to this is the row 1. Now we're going to open this up, and you'll see this is kind of like a toggle. It's attached kind of like an umbilical cord at this point, but that is correct. We want this to be just open like this at this point because we're gonna catch that later when we put the seam in here. I'll do it one more time just so that you get used to the process. Nice thing about videos, you can go back and watch this over and over if you need to. Remember that the fold here has to be towards the center of this block too, so that means it has to be brought around and in place. Pull that back a little. Pinning again as we go, just to hold things in place. And pin here. And again, this is like a sandwich. We're going to put right sides together so it loops over, does a little flip. Seeing that our flannel rectangle is in place, I'm going to pin through all layers to hold things in place. And one out here. You're going to do this many, many times throughout the quilt, so you'll get very used to the process. It's just the first few times it seems very strange to be twisting fabric, because usually we're so concerned about keeping everything flat and aligned, and you are intentionally putting a twist on that rectangle as you bring it from one row to the next. But it needs to jump across, and we'll show you why here. Get to the end. Just wanted to make sure we at least stitched a couple of them so that you would get the idea of how to flip and pin and stuff. Okay, so it should look like, stretch it back out, almost like there are flying geese laying in between these rows. And you notice the row is not actually attached yet, it's just like a toggle between the rows. Now I have one that is partially created, so I'm going to bring that one in next. And we can talk about how to join that row together. Now you can see that it gets a little messy. You just have to be patient. Use gentle care to lay everything back out. See, I have 2 rows already joined here, and I'm actually working on a 3rd row. Okay. Orient everything so you can tell where we're at. I have these what looks to be like, almost like the flying geese. I said they flip back and forth. What we need to do is join this row. And in order to do that, we're going to lay this column, the row, on top of the other. No matter if it's row 2, 3, 4, it's always the same process. I'm going to bring this around so that you can see into the side of here. See, that's where that toggle piece is at, each in its place. Now what we want to do is to open this up and realign it. We're going to create a fold in the center. You're also going to want to, and most of us would look for opposing seams, so these denim seams going in different directions. So the top one I'm going to lay in this direction, the bottom one seems to want to go the other, so we're going to let it, so we have opposing seams there. And put a pin in. Takes a little bit of patience, a little bit of pinning, and you'll see that that folds out, and it's about 1/4 inch. So there's a straight line and then it angles. That's where I want to be seaming it. So I'm going to pin this just to catch it in place. Then I'm going to lay that denim back over the top and pin down through the layers. And do the same thing on this side. You'll notice again, it creates kind of a straight line or a right angle to the cut edge and then angles off. That's the position I want. So I'm going to put a pin in here. And you would continue down through that row, opening up your rectangles. Get a hold of the edges, there we go. Open them up. There's going to be a fold toward the center, right there. You're going to want your denim to go in different directions so that you can have opposing seams. Kind of tuck that fold back just a little bit. Try to get that intersection aligned up. Pin there. The intersections aren't quite as critical because they're going to be covered by the little 3D knot, but because they are all cut specific lengths, that will keep your quilt top aligned properly so you don't stretch one row over another. And then you want to go in and do the same thing, folding that knot and pinning. Now sometimes they get a little bit stubborn and you have to push the fold back down. I caught too much of it in that seam there. But from time to time, just take a deep breath. Remember, it'll be fine. You're going to stitch. Yep. So not even for me does it want to work today. Now fold that. Get a hold of it. There we go. That's better. You're going to stitch through the layers. And we're going to take that to the sewing machine then and stitch part of that, and I'll open it and show you how the 3D knot is formed. Again, it's a 1/4 inch seam. When I was working on this, I realized that because the denim is kind of loose weave, I wanted to go back and reinforce my seams. So I did do a zigzag over the edge of the seams. I'm not sure if the original designer did, but it's just a technique that you might want to do to keep your edges from raveling. We'll just sew part of it here, and I'll show you where we're headed. 1/4 inch seam there. When you open up, this, oops, I'll orient it so you see the top. You'll see that the knot just pops right out. And you've got your 3D knot created, and it's loose on both sides, and it's a perfect square on point. Okay, now I've got another piece created, a little bit larger, because we need to talk about that last row. Whoops. Well, it's gone now. Okay, we've got everything oriented. See how we've got rows of knots along. The last row that you attach, when you get to the far end of your quilt along this side, the pieces that are set in, let me get these oriented correctly, the blocks that you're setting in, the top one, follow your diagram with your pattern, the top one has one rectangle attached. All consecutive ones after that have one rectangle also attached and basted in place, and the bottom square has none. So make sure that you are aware of the orientation for that last block. It's nice because you don't have to put anything on it. Now, we've got all these pieces on the outer edges, and it doesn't quite look like our quilt yet. So what you need to do, once you've gotten the center all created, is come to the outside edge and refold all of the outer edge rectangles. Your fold will give you an indication of where is center. You can underneath feel the seam, put your fold line right along that seam, and you're going to open each of them out, and you can pin them in place just with a couple of pins just to hold them, and then go in and again baste them down. So you would come in and I'll use this as a pointer, baste right along the edge. You can then cut away the excess of that rectangle, so it creates this triangle shape. The only thing you have left to do at that point is the outer corners. So let's slide this down. On each of the corners, it had you, in the back in the beginning in the instructions, it said to cut 4 of these really small squares, and you're wondering, where did they come into play? Okay, this is the spot. So you take one of these squares, you fold it in half diagonally, and that becomes your outer corner. And I had a sticker on there so I remembered where it went. And then you can baste that also in place. And you've created your entire quilt top. At this point, this quilt was then machine quilted and tied. The designer decided to use pearl cotton. After she had quilted everything in place, she went back and stitched an X across each of the intersections, kind of like the center of a button. So it was really fun to do. She also did not put batting in her quilt, but machine quilted it to a piece of flannel. You can add batting if you like, just use a lighter weight version for a great quilt. For more of our video tutorials, visit our website. Thanks for joining me today.